Hi, my name is Zaria Spell, and I am from Georgia by way of Florida, and I am studying creative and professional writing. I currently identify as Black American. I'm a Black American woman. Becoming or realizing that I am a Black woman, a Black American woman, was definitely a process. For the longest time, in my childhood, I had always been, exposed to different settings, different environments, different races. I grew up in a pretty diverse area, I would say. And so understanding what it meant to be Black or a Black woman wasn't something that I completely understood, because I had to learn how to adjust and adapt different sides of myself depending on who I was around and what environment I was in. And so I had a very confusing idea of what it meant to be Black. I grew up with parents who, wanted to instill in me the confidence and the self-esteem that comes with, my heritage and knowing where I come from. But it was still a process. And to be honest with you, it still is a process, because I feel like I'm constantly reviewing and going back to reassess what history is telling me about myself. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, home to Disneyland and all the awesome amusement parks. I grew up in I would say a pretty diverse area. I grew up around many different, Black people, primarily from here in America, and I would say some Caribbean, a lot of Latino, a lot of Latinos, because Florida does have a very big Latino Hispanic population. And of course, whites as well. What it was like, oh my goodness. I can remember, going to different schools, many different schools, several different elementary schools, middle schools when I was in Florida. But I remember, knowing and seeing such a stark contrast between settings where there were, mostly Black children and settings where there were mostly white children, and then settings where, there was a good mixture of the two, and then other races. And so when I was in largely Black environments, whether they were schools or cheerleading teams, I always felt like there were some parts of me that I had to hide, because it wasn't fitting or in sync with the dominant Black culture. Just like the type of music that I listened to, or the way I talked, or just my general thinking about things. I grew up just having to learn to sort of keep that part of me hidden, because I didn't want to be made fun of, or I didn't want to be outcast, which is a very normal thing when you're a child. My black friends would be all into, hip hop and R&B, and I loved those genres, but I also loved these other genres. I loved rock, I loved pop, I loved, alternative stuff. I was raised to always think outside the box and expose myself to things that were not normal to me. And on the contrast, when I was in largely white settings or just settings that were primarily non-black, I also felt like I had to hide certain sides of myself, because I would say I would be in a setting where I'd speak slang, or I would talk about a song that I really loved from like a black artist, or just describe like something that was normal to like my culture. And my white friends or my non-black friends would be like genuinely confused, or at worst sometimes like completely oblivious, and like it was just a lot of like weird energy in that space between me being black and then this other student or this other person, this other kid, coming from like a different culture. And so therefore I felt like I also had to hide certain parts of myself to be around other kids, because as a child, as a black child, especially with like the way I grew up, I was not raised in a very stereotypical version of what many people see as a black person or a black woman. And so I always carried like this very heavy like insecurity and just this very heavy mission to like not show certain parts of myself, because I was so fearful of being stereotyped. I was very fearful of being seen as like a clown and someone to laugh at while you completely disregard them behind their back. And so, and to be honest with you, it's something I still deal with, I still carry. Like I'm always just very self-conscious of how I'm coming off to others. And that started, way back as a child. Understanding what it meant to be black and having like my first introduction to, oh, you're not white, was when I was around 6 or 7 years old. And Hannah Montana was like the biggest Disney Channel star on TV. She had her own show, and I loved Miley Cyrus, and I was a big fan. I saw every episode. And one day I was coming back home from school, and my stepfather had like this little newspaper catalog of Hannah Montana merchandise, so little girls could buy the stuff like the Hannah Montana purse and bag and wig and makeup stuff and all that. And he had left it on my bed, and he left it there as a surprise. And so when I went in my room and I saw it on my bed, I was like, yes, it's here. Thank you so much. And I went over and I picked up the catalog, and I just started looking at like all of the merchandise, preparing my Christmas gift list like kids do here. And I came across a picture of, not a picture, but like a specific item, and it was like a Hannah Montana wig, and it was like a long blonde wig with bangs. because in her show, her character, who's a celebrity, she's like notorious for like her long blonde hair. And so I'm looking at this picture of this wig and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to like buy everything Hannah Montana because I want to be Hannah Montana. I want to like match her image. And I'm just looking at this picture, imagining myself wearing the wig, and it dawns on me how much different it would look on me. And it was uncomfortable because when I watch Disney Channel and watch like, you know, the previews of like these little girls at the Hannah Montana concert, you know, a large majority of them being white, you know, they'd be there with, you know, the same outfit that she was wearing and, you know, the long blonde hair. And it just like dawned on me how I couldn't find my image or myself in that. Like, if I were to like beg my parents to buy me this long, very light blonde wig and wear it, like, no one's gonna be like, oh, you look like Hannah Montana. I'd look like a black girl with a long blonde wig. I'd look like Mary J. Blige. So it was just this space, this moment of realizing that, oh, I'm not white. I feel like a lot of, you know, black people, black children, and even, you know, other, you know, dark-skinned people of color have like, you know, a moment like this at some point in their life where it's not that they're physically seeing how different they are from, you know, a beauty standard, which, you know, largely what's given to us is a white beauty standard. It's that they're psychologically understanding it. And it's like, oh, I'm finally coming to terms with that this isn't my image, like this wasn't created for me. And it's an experience I feel like no child under the age of 10 should have to go through. But, you know, I moved along with it. And thankfully, you know, in this day and age, you know, we have social media, we have so many more black female artists and entertainers and young black female entertainers that, you know, young black girls can look up to and be like, yes, this woman looks like me. She's doing it big. She's amazing. And it's a very happy thing, I feel. James Baldwin, there was a very great documentary done on James Baldwin called I Am Not Your Negro that came out, I think, a year or two ago. And in there he has this quote where he's speaking to like he's on this like a stand and he's speaking to like this large group of white Americans. And he talks about how as a black child, when you're watching, you know, these movies of these, you know, heroic, masculine white cowboys, you know, fighting these American Indians, and he's like, as a black child, you know, you're rooting for this white guy, you're rooting for the white hero, and it doesn't occur to you that you're actually the Indian. And that message is so profound in so many ways, because that was my experience when I was 6 or 7, that Hannah Montana was my white heroic cowboy. So ever since then, to me, understanding who I am as a Black woman and, as a person of color, as a person with a very rich heritage, has been a long journey of just like uncovering stuff and reviewing and reassessing what I've been taught from my school teachers in the educational system here. And it's fascinating. Where I am right now as a Black woman is thankfully not, where I was when I was 6 or 7, just completely confused. But I'm much more, honestly, just starting the journey of womanhood and this womanhood being connected with my heritage. Historically, there's, been so much strife and so much oppression towards womanhood and also towards, dark-skinned people, Black people, globally. And this has been going on for, just hundreds and hundreds of years. And so I am at a point where I am starting to, or not starting to, but getting a lot better at uncovering the lies and the deceit that is, passed down through lineage and passed down through educational systems that are not meant to teach us the truth and empower us with the correct knowledge. I'm still, just getting acquainted with my womanhood and understanding my relationship to it, because as a young girl growing up in the black community, I will say the messages you're given about womanhood and what it means to be a woman can be extreme on both ends. Like, on one hand, you're given this very, in many cases, hypersexual, raunchy, very out there image of growing up in the Black community in America. As a girl, you're given a lot of very extreme images and symbols of what it means to be a Black woman, and rarely is it, ever balanced out. On one hand, there's this image of being just very hypersexual and very raunchy and very darn, okay, what's another word? In some cases, slutty. And then on the other hand, you're given this very bland image of being, unattractive and being, a religious freak in some cases, and, being completely disconnected from, your feminine essence. And it's like these two images are constantly constantly thrown to you. And then we have this image of, this super independent woman who needs no one, and she has the worst attitude, and no one likes her. And rarely is it that you can see, an image of Black women that's balanced, that's holistic, and that shows her as a human person with feelings, and who cries and has, bad days, and has people that support her. And where I am now is, learning to connect with my own feminine essence and find and understand the different sides of myself that are vulnerable, sexual, studious, and devoted to the divine, and all these different sides of human beings that we have, whilst at the same time, rejecting these extreme images that we're subconsciously indoctrinated with. And a lot of the times I worry about how I'm perceived and how I come off. And this sort of ties back into me being a youth and feeling like I couldn't be my actual authentic self because I always had to adjust so people didn't have this misconception about me or think of me as a stereotype. As a Black woman in America, living in America, I identify and see myself as a woman, as a young woman, and then, of course, every so now and then I'll get reminded that, oh yes, I'm Black. It's thankfully, it doesn't happen all the time. And then when it does happen, it's not in a very blunt, very, very disrespectful way, thank goodness. But really, to be honest with you, a lot of my current struggles with understanding my heritage and being proud of it and fitting in with it is much more of a self-work issue than it is how other people see me. How do I feel about America right now? I feel that America meaning the United States, is currently tiptoeing on the edge of major transformation. It is, we are standing on soil that has been cultivated and built off the backs of the blood, sweat, and tears of millions of people of color. And it is my strong opinion that when a country is built off of strife and violence and war and racism and sexism and all the other isms, it eventually will have to come to terms with that past, with that history. One thing that you hear some people say is why do we always have to talk about racism, or why do you have to bring race into it, or can we all just get along? Like, oh my gosh, all you see is color. And it's like, the reason this issue keeps persisting and it keeps coming up is because it isn't fully being dealt with quite yet. When you're living and benefiting off of racism and sexism and, you know, just oppression in general, and at worst you try to avoid it and turn your head, it doesn't go away. It simply becomes a part of your shadow. And that is something that all of us have to reckon with, regardless of what color we are. When you're benefiting off of oppression, when you are turning a blind eye to the strife that is occurring, you will have to reckon with it someday. And so from what I've been learning and what I've been reviewing about myself as a descendant of Black people, is so much more insidious and downright evil than what is being taught to us in our educational system. I'll just say that. And it is going to take some real time and some real work and some real honesty in order to actually heal these collective wounds that we have. Why I decided to come to MIU. I decided to come here because I was in the search for, you know, community and a place where I could grow spiritually, but also, you know, cultivate my gifts and my talents to do me and the world good when I graduate. And that is the simplest reason why I came here to MIU. And thankfully, me deciding to come here has been so rewarding. I've been able to make friends with and meet and learn with people from so many different countries, and I've been able to learn to meditate and understand my inner self more clear. I've been able to develop great relationships with my professors, and I'm truly grateful to be where I am now. I don't think I would rather be in any other place in America right now. What advice would I give to people right now, not just in America, but anywhere in the world, is to stop pointing your finger outwards. Stop with the polarity, this political belief, this political party versus this political party, this race versus this race. Men, women, like, stop pointing out so much and start going within. Start getting more focused on healing yourself and put more focus on understanding who you are in your shadow and dealing with the shit that you're not willing to look at. Doing that for yourself is going to benefit you and humanity far more than any protest, any rant, any gun, any violence ever will.